Hello everyone. Welcome to Helicon West. I'm Ashley, your MC this evening. Thank you guys all so much for being here. Helicon West is an uncensored public reading series. We regularly host published authors alongside community writers to promote and support all levels of skill, ability, and craft. If you would like to read during the open mic, you can sign up on the sheet. Do we have that sheet out?
It's by the coffee.
Over by the coffee, perfect. And if you'd like to donate to keep Helicon West going, we have bookmarks on the coffee table with a QR code link. We acknowledge that Helicon West operates on the territory of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation. Our events are made possible with support from Sugar House Review, the Logan Library, the USU English Department, and community volunteers. For our full land acknowledgement statement, interviews with featured readers, merch, and more, visit heliconwest.wordpress.com. We're so excited to have with us today Rachel Rueckert. Rachel is an award-winning writer, editor, and teacher. She holds an MFA from Columbia University and a Master's of Education from Boston University. She is the author of the memoir East Winds, A Global Quest to Reckon with Marriage, and 2 historical fiction novels coming out with Kensington Books in 2024. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Rachel.
Thank you so much. There's spaces up here too if you don't feel too shy. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me in this beautiful space, and I'm excited for the open mic portion and get to hear from some of you as well. And it's also great to be here in Logan. My co-star of this book I'll be reading from, East Winds. It's my memoir I worked on for 8 years, but my husband Austin was born here in Logan, so it's really great to be here. Really briefly, first just raise your hands. Has anyone here ever read this or know what it's about, or can I just launch into my spiel? Okay, great. That's what I was hoping for. So right after I got married, I went on a whirlwind backpacking shoestring honeymoon across the world for a year, and I was an anthropologist by background, and so I studied what marriage and wedding traditions mean around the world while grappling with what it meant to me as a woman who was raised Mormon and doing the whole temple sealing and all that high stakes stuff. So it's an external journey, it's an internal journey, and I'll just read 3 little snippets of this just to kind of give you a snapshot. It's also a coming of age story, it's a lot of things. And then if we have a little bit of time, I have a novel coming out. And it's about pirates, and who doesn't want to hear about that? So we'll end on that. A totally different genre, but really fun. So here's East Winds. Just to give you kind of a flavor of what motivated this book. Again, it took 8 years to write. It was kind of the book I had to write. I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that, just the thing you had to write. So I'm actually going to start by reading the dedication page, as odd as that can be. So it starts, for Austin. Also, for the 16-year-old who felt concerned about where to attend college, only to be told by her boyfriend, it doesn't matter where you go, you'll only need your degree if your husband dies. To the girl who received dishes, pans, and towels for holidays, while her brother received stereos and skis, then received a hope chest filled with linens and quilts for her high school graduation. For the 23-year-old who was cornered by a bishop's wife after church and asked, "Do you always feel like an old maid wishing you were already married?" For the young woman who was encouraged to wear makeup because the frosted cookies are always the first to go. For the 20-something struggling with eating disorders and depression who was often told by people at church, "You're so beautiful. I don't understand why you aren't married yet." To which you reply, "It must be my horrible personality." For the young woman who was told that if she wore her Army Class A uniform to church, she would never attract a husband because he would feel like he wasn't the boss in the relationship. For the woman who showed up to her new congregation's meet and greet and was asked by the same person multiple times who her husband was, then had to keep stating that she was unmarried. It was just her. For the 20-year-old who felt like running on her wedding day when she heard that she was promising to hearken to and obey her husband, but he didn't have to do the same for her in return. For the 30-something who gets placed at the kids' table during family reunions while her 19-year-old married cousins sit with the adults. For the senior who showed her BYU undergrad advisor her grad school acceptance letter from Stanford and was met with, "How lovely, maybe you'll marry a nice linguist." For the woman who stayed in an abusive marriage because leaders told her that once you choose your love, you love your choice, no matter what. For the biomedical PhD specializing in cancer immunology, who was constantly told that having a family was a holier pursuit, that her priorities weren't in order. For the 20-something whose honored grandparents warned her that if she didn't stop traveling and exploring so much, no man would be able to catch her, so she reined herself in so she could be caught. For the third-generation missionary who was taught that she could balance career and family, with a wise grandmother stating that she had better things to do than climb into bed with some damn man. For all these Mormon women and hundreds of others who shared with me these and other experiences, some similar, some opposite, all different, we are never a monolith. Here I add my singular truth to the mosaic. So that's not anyway. I get a lot of questions about why it's called East Winds. This book that's so much about traveling, circling the globe. East winds is actually a wind phenomenon in Davis County, Utah. Is anyone familiar with Davis County? Bend? Yeah. Not too far. We're neighbors. That's where I grew up. So this is the origin story of where this title came from. So I'll start there. Davis County, Utah sits near the mouth of a canyon. The county mostly receives calm winds from the west. Other times, a high-pressure pocket of Wyoming air races 100 miles down from the east. The pressure generates a surging wind that pushes in waves over the Rocky Mountains, slamming into the valley below with the force and speed of a hurricane. East winds topple power lines, demolish roofs, and uproot thousands of trees. Some argue these winds that tear through the Wasatch Front of the Rockies deserve a name, like the Minstrel and the Foehn winds from the Alps or the Santa Anas from Southern California. For now, the locals settle on east winds. Mormons have documented these storms in their wreckage since the pioneers' arrival. People lost their homes, their church buildings, crops, livestock, even family members. An east wind storm in 1864 pinned a woman and her infant son against a fence, battering them until they froze to death. While traveling during that same 1864 storm, Brigham Young rebuked the winds in the name of the Lord. His travel companion, Wilford Woodruff, wrote that the east wind subsided until the late 1890s. But years later, while serving as the fourth president of the church, Woodruff reported that in late years, these winds have occurred in some of their old-time severity. Perhaps he was familiar with the biblical accounts that east winds often embody God's vengeance. They announced 7 years of famine in Genesis, ripped open the sea for Moses, carried people off in Job, scattered others in Jeremiah, broke the ships of Tarshish in Psalms, dried springs in Hosea, and beat Jonah until he said, "It is better for me to die than to live." In one of my first memories, I clutched my pigtails and cowered by the mailbox during a massive east wind storm. I sobbed as I stared at the bending trees, debris flying down the road. I sobbed. Wait, I already said that. Sorry. My mom and dad chased down our uprooted mailbox. I rushed to the garage to monitor my toys and bike, the wind pounding on the metal door like a fist. I was scared for the birds, worried my plastic playground in the backyard would blow off like the peeling shingles. Mom took me inside. We stood at the bay window. She put a hand on my shoulder. I still gripped my hair, fearing I would blow away too. She asked me what I was so afraid of while trying to suppress a laugh. It must have seemed like a ridiculous fear, but the three of us, my father, then me, then my mother, in our own turn, in our own way, would blow away from that home. We're gonna do a little jump in time. Fast forward to where I'm 15 and I've recently gotten kicked out of my mom's house. So I'm now living in Sandy. In English class at my new high school, we read the play Inherit the Wind, published during the 1950s about the Scopes monkey trials in the 1920s, debating whether or not evolution should be taught in schools. I recall little about the plot of the play, retain nothing about the themes of creationalism versus evolution, ignorance versus science, harmony versus search for truth. All I recall is the haunting title taken from Proverbs 11:29. He that troubleth his own house shall inherit the wind, and the fool shall be servant to the wise of heart. My dad's house never felt like my home in the same way, but we bonded over our shared misfortune. He understood my pain and advocated for me and my siblings. I could depend on him. Settling into his place, I remember pestering him at his desk. Can I change my middle name to Adventure? My middle name was a family name, one given to me by my mother, and adventure was such a fun new word in my vocabulary, a way of manufacturing entertaining stories out of more complex ones harboring trauma. Perhaps I wasn't a person in exile, I was an adventurer. Sure, he said as he continued to type, a neutral response I didn't anticipate. I never followed through with the change. A part of me knew that, for better or worse, my mother and I were intertwined. From this, time would teach me there would be little escape. Maybe this is where I began internalizing my windy nature as fate, not just external forces outside of me blowing against me, but me, my restless nature, my badness, my potential for leaving and terrible destruction. I would carry the name my mother gave me, along with his inheritance of fear, and the moral lesson of her tragedy that seemed to have begun with, or was at least exasperated, by marriage. So, there's a lot on the home front, and I think, let me see what we're doing on time. I spent a lot of time in South America, mainly Peru, spent several months in Thailand and Bangalore, India. It's a great place. But the way that we finished our trip was we did the Camino de Santiago. Was anyone familiar with that or walked that? So, walked 500 miles across Spain in sandals. There was snow, and we were very much not prepared. This was a very much wing it trip. And so just to give you a flavor of again, this book is doing a lot, but just to give you a sense of there was an external journey here in addition to interviewing so many incredible people about what marriage and relationships meant and looked like according to them. Not necessarily trying to I'm not interested in being what does marriage mean in India? That is not my job, but making really good friends along the way and learning about their personal experiences were really meaningful. But here I am on the Camino de Santiago. This is what my writing group has affectionately called the commercial break. So this is sort of just a sensory experience to kind of let you know what that was like if anyone is interested in ever going for this particular kind of adventure, type 2 fun. All right, this is called Snapshots to Carry Home. Never let me forget the noise of plastic bags rustling in the morning before anyone dared to flip on the lights. The stench of still warm shoes lining albergue entrances. That sometimes the phrase buen camino can also mean move it or fuck you when a cyclist whizzes past. That in the ongoing debate between Southern and Northern Europeans on whether or not the window should be opened or closed in the dormitory at night, the correct answer is opened. The middle school teacher, snoring on his back, mouth agape, boots still laced, poles in hand, and a pilgrim shell centered on his chest as if in burial. How a few of Austin's snot rockets splattered on my sandals. What it felt like to pull on dirty, crusty underwear again after a lukewarm shower. Those stretches along blazing hot pavement, my skin drier than a raisin and lips scabbed as tree cotton blew like snow. The blustery man who insisted on ordering the hecho recipiente, pointing at those words atop a cafe poster featuring dozens of bocadillo options. How locals left bakeries with newspaper parcels cradled under their arms. How my jaw ached from gnawing on hard baguettes, my mouth ripped up a little at the rough texture. The night I was awake to witness Hal throw his hand in the air when Vlad the inhaler forgot a pat machine. How quickly and reliably news of bedbugs spread by word of mouth. the sun rash that erupted over the left side of my body, leaving white bubbles on my foot and hand, how Susie walked beside me, pacing her steps so her shadow would shade my feet, how she complimented me on my nice bronzing. The heat in my throat as I read the signs counting down the kilometers to Santiago, 571, 570, 569, how I didn't know what to think when I saw "Why are you walking?" spray painted on the curb. But also the pleasure of stopping for 2 breakfasts per day, the glow of fresh squeezed Spanish orange juice, how long my silhouette seemed in the early morning, a skinny swatch of dark framed in a hot pink sunrise, beams of light casting a star on the road. The ticking sound of Joannina's walking stick hitting the ground as rhythmic and consistent as a heartbeat. What it felt like to be enamored with an earthworm as long as my leg. The circular patterns cut into the distant grain fields like lines left by a vacuum cleaner. How no one knew the English name for the flower covering the landscape in billowy yellow blankets, only the name in Czech, German, Italian, and Hungarian. The satisfaction of watching my own grime swirl away in the shower drain. How pilgrims use their scallop shells to lap red wine from a fountain outside a monastery. The elderly village women in long dresses who set aside brooms to lean across their individual balconies, gossiping in quick, hushed Spanish. The grocer, wearing a Basque Nationalist t-shirt, who gave me a banana to help with muscle pain. The Cuban guest house owner who bragged about having made love to his wife on every table, including ours, then mocked my stiff classroom Spanish as he served us homemade lemon yogurt for dessert. When Austin introduced Elise to Oreos, how from then on she insisted she didn't have a problem with Oreos, she had a problem without Oreos. The best-selling book Frida and I vowed to write on how to hunt flies using a hiking pole, then a sequel on how to fix the pole using duct tape. The sight of 2 young pilgrims, an Italian chef and a German lawyer, sunbathing semi-nude outside a stone church, their clothes strewn about the entrance. The Vietnam vet who sang, "We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when," as he spun, his voice and spittle flying in all directions. What it felt to pull up a chair next to perfect strangers at dinner without feeling awkward. When someone picked up a nylon string guitar in the corner of an albergue and strummed John Lennon's Imagine, how the room of 20 people, regardless of nationality or primary language, joined the chorus as if we finally understood the lyrics. The night Austin and I pushed 2 bunks together, creating something like a full-size bed, then fell asleep immediately in each other's arms. The 4-foot nun, wearing navy loafers, who gave me a Madonna pendant on a blue thread I would wear for the rest of the pilgrimage. How I practiced a thank you conversation in my head but never saw her again. When Sheila handed Susie a fistful of wildflowers for being a beautiful woman. The way Kim sprang from her chair to help with meals, pairing feasts with platters of stacked white cheese and quince paste. The middle-aged Austrian who rested her feet on a patio chair, her orange pedicure peeking through her flip-flops. How her 3 grown children couldn't believe she was there, but I could. That listening is a gift I know how to give. That happiness can feel sacred. The lightning pain of metal ladder rungs on aching feet and the people who still had the goodness to ask, "Would you prefer the bottom bunk?" The man in a wheelchair pushing his way up a mountain, sweat glistening off his brow while his wife walked behind to support him through rocky patches. When Hal squeezed my hand and asked, "How are you?" a gentle gesture, such a small, simple gesture that made my eyes water. The grueling 31K day when Sheila didn't arrive at our destination. Someone had seen her vomiting off the side of the road. But what followed is a memory I am not at risk of forgetting. An image seared as I examined it over and over for clues of how we moved from discomfort to memories of intense presence, from self-interest to something like the semblance of belonging. Martin's flash of concern, how he ran back without hesitation. He found Sheila 4 kilometers away and returned with her. I did the math. Martin had a 39K day, and he had spent the last part moving hard and fast enough to kick up dust in his wake. The time James dragged on a Marlboro cigarette and asserted his mantra, "The way provides." How I came around to believe him. That's the commercial break. So, thank you. So now we're going to totally switch gears, because I've been in the land of fiction. How many of you write fiction? Just curious, like raise your hand, how many write nonfiction? Okay, bless us all. Yeah, how many write fiction then? So what's that, half and half? Yeah, okay. So that one took 8 years, and just like all of the therapy and so much excavation, and just like every corner of me illuminated. And then during the pandemic, I never thought I would ever write a novel. I thought I was really bad at making things up, but I found a true story from Cape Cod 300 years ago, and it's like a true forbidden love story that totally just took me away. And now I have this book that's coming out in March. So yeah, in case anyone's interested in pirates and spookiness, I'm just going to read the prologue really briefly, and then we can open up, and then I'm really eager to hear from all of you. So here's the prologue. Again, the book is called If the Tide Turns. I know this place, how the spindly grass bends against the rolling dunes, the bite of salt air, the brine of pink Atlantic mornings along the docks. I know the hideouts for lovers, the townsfolk and the church with its hard pews and shadows, a barn with a boot print, a whipping post, a cell real and imagined. I know every spine of the shore, and the woman whose voice cries and curses whenever storms hammer the bone-white sand where lies the remains of the widow and her treasure, her crew. I know something of ghosts, including some who had the audacity to survive. So that's my novel. So, yeah, thank you. You want me up here for a Q&A, Rachel? Cool. I will stand here. Hold up. Yeah, ask me anything. It's so exciting to be with a group of writers too, because you get it. Yeah.
So like, what inspired the initial, what inspired that trip, the honeymoon trip? I mean, you mentioned you're an anthropologist.
Yeah, so I studied anthropology and also English, and I was always really frustrated with what I felt was this huge chasm in anthropology, where you would have these really dense ethnographies that no one would read outside of the academy, but then when I would read travel writing, I found it very exploitative. And, passing through town one day, and here's all the funny things I saw, moving on. And so I was interested in something that wasn't that, was there a place in the middle? So, but really I knew I was going to be doing this really as soon as I got engaged, because I just was freaking out, and I felt like everything I saw around me was just like, oh, congratulations, woohoo. And I was like, I am not okay. And I didn't feel like there was a space for being able to talk about ambivalence. And so yeah, this book is very much born out of my ambivalence to understand and not accepting simple stories about complex things. And I'm not sure if I got, one answer by the time I went around asking everyone very personal questions about their life, but I'm really grateful for what I did come to. So, yeah.
So since I haven't read the book, maybe it's answered in the book, but when you started us out with To the Girl Who and went through all those harrowing experiences, were they your experiences and others' experiences, or were they all yours?
It's a good question. So about 3 years into making this, and especially those, who are writing nonfiction, sometimes you're just so close to something, it's sometimes hard to see the larger story. So as I was writing this, and I remember my first draft, I took it into my this workshop group, and it was very vague. All the Mormon background stuff was very vague. It was like, I got married in a white building, a Christian ceremony, and it took me a while to realize actually this was, it's not a book about Mormonism. It's not trying to be, but to not talk about my experiences also was it just wasn't working. And so about 2 years after getting into the draft of it, I just opened it up. I was part of this Facebook group, and a group of women, and I just asked them, like, what were you taught about marriage, and could you write it in this third person format? So like the girl the 22-year-old, and I got about 450 responses. Mm-hmm. And so what you see here in this book in the preface is just like 18 that I selected, and it was gutting to like decide which ones. But I hope maybe someday to do like an art exposition, something with all those stories, because it came just very, I think, organically, and it helped me realize like, oh, I'm not alone, and it's been really interesting publishing this. The book's almost a year old now, and how many people have said like, oh, I felt something similar, and I just felt so alone. I just didn't know. So that's, yeah, it's meaningful, it's horrifying, but it's also real. So, yeah. Anything else?
Well, I'll ask it.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Was the fact that you felt so alone part of what made it so difficult to get it out? Like, if you had known other stories earlier, would it have been easier to find your own?
I think so. I think part of the goal of this book, and I definitely didn't write it with like, here is my mission of what I want people to take. Like, I had to write it to get to a deep truth that I would recognize, and I wanted to be the book that I wish I would have had. But yeah, I think, this is like a kind of a side question, but like one of the most difficult things to write in this book was, it's really a paragraph about being kicked out of my mom's house. And it's just a paragraph, and it's just like the logistics of what happened. But I think, as what happens with trauma, or when we like gaslight ourselves or second guess our experiences, or think like, oh, I need to, be like that person or that person, but we actually don't know what they're thinking and experiencing. And so while I'm on this Camino, this like really, really long, grueling time, I really have some time to sit with the long version of stories and to start to even question like, oh, I'm weird and they're not. And it's just like, no, we're all just like very complex individuals, and so that was really liberating as well to get to. But yeah, it took 8 years for a reason to write this book. That's the short answer. Yeah. And did you have any questions?
Did you write the book in parts? Did you write different stories in the memoir and then put them together somehow? How did you configure that book?
Yeah, it's sort of like a braided thing. Like the arc of the book, it takes place chronologically over this year of traveling, and in each chapter there is some kind of flashback or something. And flashback sounds like a little bit pithy. Like, it really is sort of like something really braided into the structure. What I found in drafting it is the first draft was like the what happened draft. It's just like, here's what happened. I was fishing piranhas, and this is this, and I had this, all these conversations with people. And then over time, it was sifting out, actually, like, as fun as it was to fish for piranhas, and I can tell you how they tasted, like, that didn't make it into the book. Like, it's just like, that wasn't working for the arc, it was not just a travelogue. And so every chapter I realized needed to be connected to one of these other themes, these internal things, to show the internal and the external journey happening. So I had to cut a lot of darlings, as we know how to do. But ultimately what it ended up being, and I don't know how many of you, I'm sure, with all, Terry Tempest Williams, but she's got that one book, Refuge, and apparently she wrote all the chronology of her mother dying, and then all the other stuff, and there was 2 different drafts, and one day she just printed it all out and mixed them all together. And I definitely have some pictures of like doing that, and then lots of editing. But if you, I hope it's a seamless experience to read, but if you were to look at the back end, it's just like thousands and thousands of stitches of just like, okay, this piece feels like it can go here. It took a while to find that structure though, but I couldn't have told it any other way. I couldn't have just made it a travelogue, and I also didn't want to just be like, here's my ambivalence about marriage. That's also wasn't, I don't know. So it is what it is. But yeah. Any last things before we kick off all of you at 7:30? So
Are you still married?
I am. It's complicated, but yeah. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone.
so much, Rachel. That was amazing. Okay, so we're gonna open up the mic to anyone who wants to read now. Our first 3 readers will be Ronald Jensen, Clarissa, Casper, and Lee. Oh, is it crossed out? Lisa? You don't want to read it? Okay. Ronald Jensen, Clarissa, Casper, and Star Colvin. And I'll have the paper just up here now if you want to sign up.
Hi, Ron. Got me thrown a code. For 12 years, I was an idiot Hillcrest, had a job, I thought it was the best. I also had a job standing at CETC. It was another job, made me happy. Then nowadays, I guess my wishes are just washing dishes. Those things are going away, nothing touches the nerve. Remember that life? You throw you a code. Just a Rueckert anniversary poem. 10 years of being made to midday. The 2 things are amazing after all these years. She's a woman who's beautiful inside and out. And must have it, without a doubt. Hoping and start a nice deck of yard. Whether in the light of day, or in the dark of night. Before you want to show her, she is love. Say thank you for to the Lord above.
And let us know if you don't want to be recorded, and we'll pause the camera. For anybody.
So I am going to read a part of my article I just wrote for Salt Lake Magazine.
Congratulations! That's so cool.
It's just to give some background. I'm going to read the very end. So it's just about what's happening to the birds as the Great Salt Lake goes away or dries up. And basically, this is just my hopeful plea for them. Okay. So yeah, the story follows me just going around with ecologists and nature guides and really learning about the lake through them. And this is the end. Oh, I'm nervous. I inched down the same road my guide and I had driven months before. The saffron sun brightened the already dazzling water. A warm spring breeze made its way through my cracked window. Every Great Salt Lake birder told me that once you begin identifying and looking for the birds here, it is extremely hard to stop. They were right. I had come back to the Bear River Bird Refuge alone this time, just me and my old Subaru. I pressed my foot on the brake at the side of a large bird with a curly, long neck and a dagger-like bill with a deep blue strip by its eye. The bird looked astute, like it had so much to teach me. I quickly searched the pages of my field guide. It was a great blue heron. When the heron began to fly, its scaly wings made it look vast and strong. I followed the bird as it floated beside the road. It was now my guide, showing me its world, abundant and elegant. It showed me an ecosystem that, despite experiencing record-level low water levels, is full of the songs of creatures expressing their gratitude for what it provides. The wetlands were fuller now than they had been when I first visited, back in January, and although I knew the snow would only save the lake so much, I was elated to hear the splashing of water as ducks ran on the surface. Although delicate and vulnerable, the atmosphere felt tenacious. So were the birds. I felt a glimmer of hope.
What a nice evening. Look at this great turnout. And I got lots of inspiration. So I've been writing some short memoir pieces. I'm a poet. I write a lot of poetry, but I've had a bit of a lull in my poetic ability since about March of 2020. And so I started launching with these little short memoir pieces. And this is one of them that I'm going to read, and it's called Road Trip. So it's nothing like walking in misery for hundreds of miles. It's short road trips. Well, I also had a bunch of contextual stuff in this, and I decided I would just cut all that contextual stuff out. So you'll have to find your way, because I just got to the little meaty parts of it. Road Trip. Oh, and by the way, I wrote this in Sean's Front Room, which is a writing group that I belong to. And the prompt for this piece was to invent a character who sees a phone number on a bathroom wall. Describe what happens when they call the number. Well, I've only written one fiction piece in that whole time of 48 pieces now that I've written, and this is not fiction. Well, it is a little bit. Road Trip. My daughter is 15. We're driving together around Utah, taking in the sights. We've been on a few trips like this, the two of us, enjoying the wide open spaces and narrow highways of the West, stopping at every historical marker we see. Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, Wyoming. Utah's always our starting point. It's 1989. I'm 38. I've got a job selling life insurance and investments. I like being my own boss, free to travel with my third child, the other two married and gone, husband temporarily out of my hair. We've had a great time taking little side trips, laughing together at the quirky old places we've had to stop at when there hasn't been a convenience store or a rest stop for hours at a time. Desperate for pee, we pulled up to this little pink brick motel in the middle of nowhere, freeway having swerved away and left it starved for business. It looks abandoned. We park and get out of the car, thinking we can sneak around back and squat in the weeds. A guy comes out of the front office, looks at us expectantly, so I ask, "Do you have a restroom we can use?" He smiles in a weird way and says, "Yeah, you can use the one in the 3rd unit." We timidly walk toward it. Seems like it's okay. We go inside, turn left to find the bathroom. It's filthy but usable. Then we look at the mirror and see in red lipstick a little verse. "Don't bother to stand on the seat. The crabs in here can jump 10 feet." We look at each other, read our like minds. We've been through enough with my daughter's dad not to be thrown off by false threats. We use the questionable facility, though we don't sit down, and we go on our way, the guy at the front office still standing there watching us go. We've got one more day on the road. We know any hazards we might encounter on our way home will likely be as benign as this one was. We've been warned by my husband, my daughter's dad, that we'd better not pull any funny business like forgetting to come back. We take this warning with just enough doubt, like we take the 10-foot crab jumping, to know that we will eventually break out for good, and we do, the very next year. If I could have called the person who wrote that saying on the restroom mirror telling us not to bother, if they'd left their number so I could have picked up the phone, I would have said, "Thanks for the laugh, thanks for that ludicrous claim that was meant to scare us, but ended up giving us the courage to finally walk out of that house and never go back."
Thank you all so much for sharing. And thank you so much to Rachel again. That was just wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Our next Helicon West event will be 2 weeks from today. So it will be October 26th here at 7 p.m. and it will be a workshop. I will actually be leading the workshop, so you should all come. It'll be fun. Yeah, and Rachel also has brought some of her books of East Wind to sell.
Yeah.
So she'll be at this back table after the event. And if any of you are interested, you should totally stop by. Thank you so much for coming and have a great night.
Thank you.